All right, good morning. It is August 27, 2021. And online today, we've got Dr. Dave Gardner, Dr. Carl Danneberger, Pamela Sherratt, and the infamous Mr. Todd Hicks. We also have the designated hitter and the big league bowler for the last week or so, Dr. Dave Shetler, and we will put him on last. What I want to do is set up a running order. So I think, Pam, you can hit up first. Dave Gardner, if you want to hit off number 2. Todd, number 3. Dr. Danneberger, have you any meaningful contributions you want to make today?
Yes.
So you can go clean up.
It'll be short too, but yes, I actually have something to say.
Oh, wow. Then Dr. Danneberger can hit clean up, and Miguel Cabrera or Dave Shetler is going to finish up. I'm assuming the majority of people are on here because they want to hear about fall armyworm, but there is a whole lot of other activity going on between the temperatures and the time of year. So with that, Dr. Gardner, I'm going to ask you to be a co-host. I'm assuming you have a share. Dr. Shetler, you're going to need a share. Pam, do you need a share? No. Todd, share screen. Dr. Carl? Okay. All right, Pam Sherratt, lead us off.
Good morning, everybody. What a wonderful day it is. Well, I have 2 things I want to mention, and it's about grasses and grass species. So some of you may remember that last year I had a pool. I think I went viral somewhat because Frank Rossi put me out there because I made some tweet about finally being a hillbilly and embracing my hillbilly roots, and got myself an above ground pool in my backyard last year. And at the end of the year, I took it all down and I seeded with 100% perennial ryegrass. And I seeded it with a generic seed mix that I bought from a big box store. And I can announce today that all of that grass is completely dead. It has been ravaged by drought and disease. And so my message today is that the genetics of these grass species has come a long way. And so with the stresses that we're seeing in Ohio, we're going to see flood damage, we're going to see drought stress, we're going to see disease pressure. Just buy the best grass seed that you can. Don't do a Pam Sherratt and buy generic grass seed from a big box store. Talk with your seed supplier. Choose ryegrass varieties that are grey leaf spot resistant, brown patch resistant, Pythium, some coverage from Pythium, brown patch resistance, obviously with tall fescue varieties. So just, summer patch with Kentucky bluegrass. Look at the big stresses that can affect some of these grasses and go with the best grass that you can afford. That's my comment on that. And then second of all, what is loving it in my yard right now? Look at this. This is my Bermuda grass. And this particular stolon, I would say probably is about 18 inches long. And the Bermuda grass is loving this weather. And so I don't know what the future will hold, but I do know that we have Bermuda grass fields now in Cincinnati and along the Ohio River, and even up into central Ohio. We've had some Bermuda grass football fields installed in central Ohio. So who knows, in the future, we may be managing Bermuda grass lawns. We may be managing different types of grasses. And so I just wanted to share my wonderful big Bermuda grass stolon. And my tip for today is buy the grass. You get what you pay for. So buy good grass seed. That's it, Ed. That's all I have for today.
Thanks, Pam. Of course, I'm now aware that the good grass seed is now 10 or 15% more expensive, purely because of the damage they've suffered out in Oregon between fires and voles. So if you bought your seed 6 to 8 months ago, well done. If you're looking to buy it now, I think there's going to be 2 problems. 1, it's more expensive. 2, it's going to take a while to get to you. Apologies for that bad news. All right, following up with more bad news, Dr. Gardner, I think you are going to give us some clarification on Roundup, as well as I would expect nutsedge based on what I've seen lately.
Well, yes, I am. So actually, the news might not be as bad as I thought. So glyphosate canceled for residential use. I put this slide up the last time that we had a turf team times a couple of weeks ago, but I've received some clarification since then. I actually have the press release from Bayer about this, and I'll read part of it. They've got a plan as they describe, mitigate their long-term risk. And so as a part of that plan, they're going to replace its glyphosate-based products in the U.S. residential lawn and garden market with new formulations that rely on alternative active ingredients beginning in 2023. Now that's subject to a timely review by the U.S. EPA, but for the residential lawn and garden market, they're going to replace glyphosate with alternative active ingredients. There will be no change in the availability of the company's glyphosate formulations in the professional and the agricultural markets. So this change only affects homeowners. So again, the product's been canceled for residential use, primarily to again, mitigate risk associated with lawsuits. Moving on to crabgrass, there's a lot of it right now, isn't there? I have been recommending to people, this was a field day demonstration, and I've had some people report back that they've had some good results with this. So a half a rate of quinclorac combined with either a half rate of tepramazone or a half a rate of mesotrione will work exceedingly well in removing crabgrass at this time of the year. Something else that you want to do is to make sure to mow in order to reduce seed head development. The last thing that you want to do is to let your crabgrass, produce a crop. That is all of the seed that would populate the crabgrass in those lawns next year. And then also map out those areas and consider where you have a severe infestation, putting out a pre-emergence herbicide application, and where you have severe crabgrass pressure, target later applications on those areas. So, I was just in Indiana for a talk with their lawn care group yesterday, and a lot of them had the comment for me when I said this. They were like, yeah, Gardner, I've got like 500 sites. I can't apply to all 500 of them on April 20th. And it's like, I know, but what you can do is the areas that you have a bigger problem with, do those later in the season. And then the ones where you have a little bit less crabgrass pressure, those are the ones that you can push back to earlier in the year. Remember that the later you apply the pre-emergence herbicide, so long as the crabgrass hasn't germinated, the more likely it is that you're going to be satisfied with the season-long control with that product. Yellow nut sedge is something that has also appeared. And, this is weird. One of the things that I do at OSU is I do trials with different companies as they're developing products. And I had a couple of protocols for controlling yellow nut sedge. And as of the 15th of July, there was like no yellow nut sedge, and I was starting to sweat a little bit. And now all of a sudden, you don't have to try all that hard to find it. Again, you can thank the weather for that, but there are a variety of herbicidal options that are on the market for the control of sedge. Anything that contains halosulfuron methyl, sedgehammer is an example. Sulfentrazone, which is Dismiss or Dismiss NXT, and then imazosulfuron, which is Solero, or pyrimisulfan, which is Vexus. Those materials are all systemic. Now, Basagran is an older material. It's a contact herbicide, but that's also available. But remember that if you have an issue with sedge, the thing that you have to do is make sure that you're using a product that's marketed for the control of sedge. Recognize that it's not a grass, and don't rely on grassy herbicides in order to control those. Now, I know that Dr. Shetler is going to talk about armyworm and the devastation that it's causing. I guess maybe the only good news is that, if you do completely lose the surface, this is the best time of year to reestablish from seed, right? But the point that I want to continue reminding about is that we're still in a time of the year that you might need more water than what is being afforded by rainfall. And so if you don't have an irrigated area, it might be more difficult to get the grass to germinate. So try to wait a little bit, maybe into the middle of the month before you attempt that seeding operation. On irrigated sites, you can go ahead and do it now, and you still probably need to irrigate to keep the surface moist maybe 2 or 3 times a day. By the end of the month, we'll probably be able to back that off to, like once a month in the middle of the afternoon. It'll be just fine. But I get this every now and again where somebody says that, they think that they can irrigate out of a truck, and a 10,000 gallon water tank will give you about 4/10 of an inch of precipitation for an acre. So, just bear that in mind. All of the nerd math is sitting on the slide right there. But just to reiterate that if you're thinking of transporting water in order to make an establishment, just know that you need a lot more than you might realize. Just spritzing the soil isn't enough. You need to put down enough to keep that upper layer uniformly moist. Last thing that I want to mention, I believe, is that we're getting about to that time that if you had trouble with winter annual broadleaf weeds last year, a severe problem with them, post-emergence control in April is sometimes not a good thing. And so one option to consider is that you can put down a pre-emergence herbicide such as dithiopyr during the month of September on those areas where you had that severe infestation, or you can follow up in November with a post-emergence application of a broadleaf herbicide ester form about the time that you should be trying to control perennial broadleaf weeds. But start thinking about winter annuals and, especially on those places where you had an issue with them last year. All right. That is what I had to share today.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Much appreciated. Always full of good news. All right, following that, with more devastation and pestilence, Todd Hicks on the disease front.
Morning, everybody. No surprise with this weather pattern we're having. A lot of the major diseases are causing a lot of problems. Couple that with the fact that August, beginning of September seems to be time of year that a lot of the courses are really ramped up with events. So between rain, events, and the lack of help, people are having trouble keeping up with disease, especially dollar spot brown patches seems to have been biting at people's heels for the last 2 weeks. The good news is the weather's going to cool down here in 7 to 10 days, and hopefully you'll get a chance to get back ahead of diseases. Summer patch is another one that's been chewing away for about the last 3 weeks. Again, once the humidity disappears a bit, that one will slow down. A little bit of anthracnose, but it's not been a huge problem. Most people see it, they make a spray, and it goes away. It's not been a big issue this year. The problem has been timing, just trying to get out there and make those applications, especially when you have days where it stays, the dew irrigation water stays on till 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're already wet. When are you going to get out between that morning and afternoon rain shower? So if you have to look at your fungicide program, maybe get away from the contacts and come out with a bigger hitter like an SDHI or a combo product that you can get down the systemic and get back ahead of diseases. Maybe I do that for the start of September and then go back to rotating in with my contacts for the rest of the season. But that's about all I got right now. Everybody's just trying to maintain and get through all their big events and get through this heat.
Thanks, Todd. One thing, we're out here at Ellsworth Meadows in Hudson, and the brown patch has finally shown up, of course, just right at the end of the trial. And then the other thing that I got a picture from up in Cleveland area this morning was grey leaf spot has fired up as well now in roughs and high cut areas that were untreated. It has been festering on our high cut turf in Worcester on a location that's pretty humid, and we're doing everything wrong, i.e. we're irrigating for about 30 minutes at 5:30 p.m. Every night. So it's been merciless as far as pressure that way. But yeah, it's that tipping point. You can get through the next 5 days, I think, Todd, then we probably are going to be able to skid and kind of get back to where we want to be. Yeah,
the problem's going to come in, Ed, is dollar spots still going to maintain.
Right.
You get back into this 85, 82 degree days and 65, 60 degree nights. That's primo for dollar spots. So don't, the pedal has to be all the way down on the car for dollar spot. Yeah,
dollar spot for sure. The rest of them might ease up a little bit. All right, Lazarus, also known as Dr. Carl Danneberger.
I'm back. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, just a few things. Like many people here, I'm interested in fall armyworm myself. Thanks to everybody out there, homeowners and everybody who's texted me pictures of just dead lawns and other turf from fall armyworm. I've appreciated that. Just a couple comments. One thing kind of related to this weather pattern we're in is I've been on one course and I've received some other photographs and things, people asking me about it. I've seen slime mold appear on greens and a few things like that, and usually followed by the comment, well, it's not causing any damage, what is it? You might want to make sure if that's the case you're in, you might be facing slime mold, which is no big deal. Kind of wash it off, do whatever. But that's been one oddity this last week, besides the fall armyworm, that I've noticed. And then the second thing, just an announcement here at Ohio State, at the Ohio State Scarlet Course. This week is the Corn Ferry Tournament, the nationwide tour event is at the Scarlet, and registration is free. So if you get things under control agronomically and have a free weekend or a day, come to Columbus and watch some of the best pros play golf. That's it.
Thanks, Carl. The clear dichotomy between academia and everybody in the field. Everybody in the field is running around with their hair on fire. Carl's like, let's go watch some golf. All right. All right. The minor leaguers have gone through. Let in the big dog, Dr. Shetler.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad everybody was able to attend this morning, and obviously the topic of du jour is the fall armyworm. Here's a picture actually outside of the OSU OTF field house or our facility here on campus. And here you can see where the turf is literally melting away. And I'm always amused. I got a whole bunch of emails that said the turf suddenly disappeared. And the reality is no, the turf didn't suddenly disappear. This caterpillar here looks like it's probably a 5th instar. That caterpillar has been there for probably 3 weeks. And the problem is that when they're in the first, second, and third instars, they're little tiny caterpillars. You don't see very much from them. When they get into that 4th, 5th, and 6th instar, they're big, fat, and sassy. They can a 6th instar caterpillar can eat probably 100 times more food per day than that little 1st and 2nd instar. And so, indeed, it may appear that the turf disappeared overnight, but these caterpillars have been there for some time. Now, when I first got the first reports of these, everybody was just saying armyworm. And I do want to point out that there are different species of armyworm. We do have the common armyworm. This is a native insect. It resides here during the winter time as larvae and pre-pupae. All armyworms have stripes, so you can see the stripes on them. The difference is the common armyworm has a brown head capsule with this sort of H-shaped mark on the head capsule. The other armyworms, the fall armyworm and the yellow striped armyworm and even the beet armyworm are tropical species. They're all in the genus Spodoptera, easy for me to say. And these are like the black cutworm. They can only overwinter down in the Gulf states. So every year they have to migrate north. And I apologize. I've been watching the entomologist reporting from Oklahoma through Tennessee and Rick Brandenburg in North Carolina over the last 2 months, talking about armyworm outbreaks in their turfgrass in that zone. My feeling is that the fall armyworm had built up its 2nd generation about 4 to 5 weeks ago, and that's about the time that we had a storm front that blew up from the south. It was one of the remnants of one of the hurricanes, and that probably blew up the adult moths of these insects. The moths can actually get up into the jet stream of fronts. They'll actually go dormant. It's too cold for them to be active. But once they're up in those high-speed winds, they can be blown up to 500 miles in a 24-hour period. And then when they drop out of that airstream, they're still alive. They haven't been frozen, but they'll land, find places to lay eggs, and then we can have these outbreaks. The adults do lay large numbers of eggs. Females typically lay about 300 to 500 eggs in a single mass. First lay their eggs in structures overhanging the turf. And Here you can actually see this is on a golf course where there was a utility building out there, and you can see all of these armyworm. Now I can't tell the egg mass whether this is fall armyworm or yellow striped armyworm. Both of them do the same type of egg laying, but you can even see egg masses here on the undersides of the clapboard siding and also on the overhang of this roof. It's one of the things that I try to train golf course superintendents. If their mowing crew goes out when they remove the flag to mow the greens, check that flag because you can have 3 to 4 armyworm egg masses on that flag. And of course, that means you're going to have several thousand little caterpillars dropping down on that green when those eggs hatch. What do you do about them? Just take your fingers and pop them. They're very easy to pop and squash, get rid of them that way. Now, what everybody wants to know is a little bit about the difference in the life cycle. You probably really want to know, how the hell do I just control these things? The reality, as I indicated to you before, our common armyworm does overwinter here in Ohio. It typically attacks our grassy type field crops for the first couple of generations. And then in the second or in the third and fourth generation, it often attacks our turf, but that's usually in July when we have a common armyworm outbreak. Now, the fall armyworm and the yellow striped armyworms, those are ones that complete more generations down south. It's usually not until their 5th or 6th generation that they move up north. When we have low populations of them, they end up on the greens and tees on golf course turf, and most superintendents just think that they're another cutworm because they make those typical pock marks and so forth. When they come up in mass like they have this year, they'll lay hundreds of egg masses, around hundreds of egg masses times 500 eggs. That's literally thousands upon thousands of these caterpillars, being present. And usually it's later in the season. It's usually in mid to late August into September that we see these. Now, the question that I'm getting right now is, will these re-attack the turf that has been attacked now? The general answer for that is no. In the ones that I was inspecting yesterday out at our Turfgrass facility, I would say that maybe a third of them have been parasitized by a couple of little fly parasites. And there were a fair number of them that had both bacterial and viral diseases. So in order to not, propagate more and more of those biological controls or those natural controls, most of these armyworms will not lay their eggs where there was a previous infestation. Now, there's plenty of more turf out there. So the reality is we need to be watching out here in September for maybe some spot infestations in turf that's not being attacked right now. Now, before I get to the actual controls for these, I want to make sure that we handle damaged turf correctly. There was a question about that on the chat. Turf that has been denuded, in other words, all the green leafy material has been eaten down to the ground, basically means that the crowns of that grass are exposed to the sunlight. And the crowns can be dehydrated. They can literally be burned up pretty quickly. So I strongly recommend, if at all possible, in the heat of the day, probably around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on golf courses, if you can just hit your syringe cycles and cool those down. In home lawns, if the homeowner can pull out a irrigation head or something like that, and at least cool down. You don't really, we're not talking about a lot of water. We're just talking enough water to cool them down. We're familiar with that on golf course greens and tees in the summertime where we do that afternoon syringing to cool them down. But we need to explain that also to the homeowners that if they've lost their turf canopy, they really need to cool that down. Now, the good thing is that the armyworms have not killed the turf, but what they have done is they've removed all of the canopy to expose the crowns. And so how about fertilizer? I usually don't recommend fertility because there's usually enough fertility there. And once the cooler conditions arrive, the grass will recover and start to put a canopy up. And again, that will protect the crowns from desiccation or heat death. When it comes to the actual controls for professionals, any of the pyrethroids will work. Bifenthrin, beta-cyfluthrin, lambda, gamma, cyhalothrin, permethrin, deltamethrin, pick any pyrethroid. Generally at the medium to low application rate will work just fine for caterpillars. We're not trying to kill bill bugs. We're just going to kill caterpillars. So that medium to low rate of the pyrethroid will work. Obviously, bifenthrin and the generics are probably the cheapest way to go with those. I'm seeing some of the companies stepping in and they're trying to extol the diamides, things like acelepryn and tetrino. I noticed that I think it was DuPont has got a new combination one out there using dinoteffuron. That's another diamide, or that happens to be a neonic. But again, my feeling is these are really expensive for a curative control this late in the season. However, you might want to consider them next year. We do sometimes see that these armyworm outbreaks do occur on a 2-year cycle before they disappear again for another 5 to 7 years before they show up. When it comes to the neonics, imidacloprid, thiamethoxam have virtually no activity on the caterpillars, but clothianidin or arena and dinoteffuron, which is in xylam, do have activity. And if you still have access to carbaryl, the real 7, that also will work in knocking down caterpillars very rapidly. For the homeowners, again, there's a ton of these products at most of the garden centers, and you can use any number of these. I do recommend that if you can spray, typically you'll get kill within 24 hours, and that's usually your maximum kill. If you can only use granules, expect that it may take about 3 to 5 days for those granules to reach the same level of control as a liquid spray. I'm not going to go through this laundry list, but you can see there's ortho products, spectricide products, garden products, some of the Scott's products. Now the Scott's products, they don't have a single use product. They have their fertilizer with surface insect control in it. That could be used. Bayer products, and like I said, there's a couple of other smaller companies that have products also. Generally with these pyrethroids in them, those would all be good choices for armyworm control at this time of the year. Okay, that's it. That's the quick talk about armyworms and their control.
Hey, Dr. Shetler, I have a question. So a good friend of mine, her lawn was pretty much decimated with this. It was just hammered. And so she's got a lot of leaf tissue that's lying over and it's dead, it's matted. And traditionally I would have said, get in there either with your hands or a leaf rake, get all of that debris out there so that you can get some sunshine down to the crowns, they can get some, rejuvenation. With the grass being so stressed though, do we want to avoid things like scarifiers and things like that? Do we just do this by hand and leaf rake? Do we leave it alone? What would be your recommendation on that, please?
My recommendation at this point is leave it low. It looks terrible. But the reality is most of that organic matter that you're seeing was there to begin with. It's just been exposed because the canopy is gone. I'm more concerned about, especially for the next 3 to 4 days, where we're supposed to have those daytime temperatures up in the 90s. I'm worried that the crowns can actually get cooked in that sun. So I think cooling it down, keeping it cool until the cool weather arrives. I think like next Tuesday and Wednesday, it's really going to cool down. And at that time, you can probably stop the afternoon watering to keep turfgrass cool.
Great advice. Thank you.
One concern I have with that, Dave, the problem with potentially cottony blight and pythium. Do you have any concerns there? How do you think that could be a potential?
Yeah, well, it's like anytime you turn homeowners over to watering the lawn, they either put way too little or way too much. And obviously the way too much, if you're, when I'm saying syringing, we in the industry know what that means, but to the homeowner, they're not sure what that means. And The easy thing is if you're watering that after you finished watering, you're walking across it and it's squishy, you've applied way too much. All I really want to do is keep those crowns that have been exposed to the sunlight just cool down a little bit in the afternoon. Obviously, I wouldn't water after 4 o'clock because I don't want that water to be in that moist thatch stuff that remains. That's just going to be ripe for all kinds of diseases to come in.
Okay, folks, we'll take any questions that you might have. Apologies for the chorus of birds' nests I have around my back ear.
Yeah, I would mention I did indicate that acelepryn is not really all that. Acelepryn is great as a curative control, but it's pretty expensive to just use that here this late in the season, and you're only going to get another month of residual out of that. That's when the caterpillars are going to be active. However, I'm a real proponent of using acelepryn, even tetrino, the newer diamide, in the springtime, typically in April and May. When you use either one of those at the full label rate, you can expect caterpillar control for at least 3 and possibly even 4 months during the summertime. So I would rather put my money into using those as a early season preventive rather than a late season curative.
Greg Shaner is never buying you lunch again. Any questions, folks? Feel free. This is why we do the live version. How does the grub population look this fall on high cut turf, Dr. Dave?
I'm not seeing that there's a couple of hot spots. We've seen a large number of Japanese beetles up in sort of the Akron area. And then there's another hot spot just a little bit south of Dayton. I think those areas may be at risk, but in most of the rest of the state, Japanese beetles have been AWOL. They've just not shown up. And so the same thing with the mass chafers. Last year, where I was getting hundreds per night in late June, early July, I was lucky to get 4 or 5 mass chafers in my light trap per night this summer. So my feeling is the grub population will be patchy. There will obviously always be a few hot spots, but in general, I think they're going to be way down.
Folks, if you don't want to type it in the chat, feel free to unmute yourselves. Or write it in the chat. Okay, Solheim Cup at Inverness in Toledo next weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Labor Day Monday. Thank you, John. All right, looks like you covered everything that needed to be answered, Dr. Shetler, unless we're going to do the going, gone. Folks, if there's no further questions, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today. If there is something on your mind or happens over the weekend, feel free to reach out to Dr. Shetler. He's great with thousands of emails, I'm sure. And Dr. Gardner will take all your pictures, and Dr. Danaher will take all your pictures and text messages as well. He's really going to be useful for that. We'd like to thank you all for your time and support. Remember, the OTF golf outing for scholarship purposes is coming up in October, and the ATI outing is up at the end of September. With that, I will put an end to the recording and say thank you all again.